All right, we're live.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks so much for coming. It's really great to see you here tonight. We've got a really talented modeler that I just got lucky and found from a Facebook page post. Jozef van Eenbergen. I hope that's how you pronounce your last name.
That's fine. That's fine. Don't worry about it.
He's his company, Canuck Models, and it's a great story about why he named it that. He makes logging items, kits, and I'm writing about him in both of the magazines that my New Tracks articles appear in. And he's been gracious enough. He's going to have a contest drawing for both of the magazines, one for S scale and one for O scale, of a free one of his logging kits that you'll see him talk about tonight. So when the articles come out, one of them's coming out the end of this month, and the other one will come out the end of next month. So if you happen to see those and you're interested, I hope you'll enter his contest. So Jozef, thank you so much for that, and thank you for appearing tonight, and we look forward to your discussion.
Thanks, Jim, and thank you for having me. First of all, I wasn't expecting when I started out with this for fun to actually be doing one of these days. So yeah, thank you for having me. So yeah, hello everyone. Jozef. I'll stick with just the first name. I kind of want it to be fairly open, so if you have questions as I talk through stuff, just like ask right away. And I guess since Jim started with the whole Canuck name, I guess I'll explain that one first. I'm originally from the Netherlands. I lived there for a while, then moved to France, and after that, actually ended up in Vancouver, Canada, and loved it so much that after I finished my studies there, I ended up in the UK, but kind of had the chance to come back to Canada 2 or 3 years ago, and so I ended up moving back. And Canuck, written with a K, is actually slang for a Dutch Canadian back in I think the word first appeared in the 1850s, 1850 or so. So I figured it was kind of a nice way of doing things with like, hey, well, I'm a Dutchie living in Canada, so might as well call myself Canuck. And that kind of stuck, and so I kind of picked that name for what is now a bit of a small, tiny little business that I do in my spare time, really. Making model kits, and the thing that I try and do or that I like to do is everything that I build as a kit or sell as a kit is something that I need myself, as in it all started out with that. I moved back to Canada, and having lived in Vancouver, I just got really excited about the logging industry and how that all worked. I then kind of didn't do anything with modeling for like 20-30 years. I did a lot of it when I was a kid. My dad had his own N scale, or still has his N scale, and my mom actually does a lot of craft as well. So I actually picked it up when I was fairly young, but then didn't do anything with it. I did a lot of 3D modeling as a job. I worked in the visual effects industry for about 10-15 years, so did a lot of modeling there. And that kind of died down a bit, and I went to more on the software side of things, but that urge to just create things kind of stuck. And I just like, the small little details. This is kind of what I love doing. I just kind of stuck with that. And as the urge grew, as I moved back to Canada, I kind of live near the tracks here, near the old port in Montreal. And there's this massive train, or at least massive for me, like it's an American sized train. I'm used to European ones, which are tiny. If there's 5 cars in there, it's a long train. This one kept going for 2-3 kilometers. So yeah, I just got really excited seeing those things again, and that kind of sparked the whole thing. Hey, well, I can't afford buying the kits that I see online. So let's just try and make them myself. That one keeps me busy with my modeling. 2 gets me to play with my hands again. And 3, just, I'm just having a good time. At the moment, I'm still in an apartment, so I don't really have an actual layout yet. I'm just still building things as I go. But yeah, that's kind of where it all started. I started in HO scale, and then I think it was, I need to get his name right. I think it's Dan. He roams around the ON30 Facebook groups as well. He lives in Ontario, so not too far away. And he's like, oh, you should try O-scale, try O-scale. And he's like, I want your sawmill on O-scale. So I just started building it in O-scale, and I printed it in O-scale. I was like, all the tiny little details that I barely saw in HO, but I knew they were there just because I modeled them in 3D. It's like, oh wow, I can actually see them, and I can actually use them. So I kind of switched recently from HO scale to ON30. I still have the kits in HO scale, and I still do them in S scale as well. For other people, but my own stuff is now pretty much ON30. I guess you can see the what you call it, the 3D models of it, but I can start with the actual models because I got them literally laid out on my desk here. So I'll just show off the sawmill itself, this big chunk here, which was the first one I did. This is just, for example, the carriage. I don't know if you can see that or if I need to do more light on it. I suspect I'm going to need some more light. Let's see.
You know what works really well for showing off models with Zoom is if you download the Zoom client on your phone and rejoin the meeting from your phone and use the back camera on your phone, the one you use when you take real pictures, not the not the front camera where the screen is.
Yeah.
It actually turns out that's the best way to share stuff.
Right.
You can pin video.
Not time now, but for anybody in the future, because you literally are almost holding a video camera and you can see what it's showing and show everybody. It lets you actually get down close to models, and they have about a 5-inch focal distance, 4 or 5-inch focal distance.
Okay, we'll try and get that installed. Shouldn't take too long.
Yeah, if you got a phone, it's great. It's take a minute.
Yeah.
I actually did a thing on another session where I went through, I'm building a module that's Moss Landing in California, went through kind of how the modules were designed and laid out and been kind of built, but then I took the camera, the iPhone, and went down and actually showed what kind of the state of build. So it works out really well. Anyway, enough said.
All right. No, that's actually a really good tip. I didn't think of that one. I got the other screen set or the other computer set up with the display. Like that's going to be easy, but I didn't think of this one. Let me just.
Joseph, just once you got that set up, so you can show them the models that you have there.
Yeah.
Just let me know. What I can do is I can put that video on top, so everyone's seeing it at the same time.
Gotcha. All right.
By the way, that's another thing for everyone. When you're in here and you're not sharing the screen, at the upper right in Zoom, you'll see a little box that says either speaker view or gallery view. And so the speaker view, what it does is it follows the speaker's sound and shows you who's talking big. The gallery view, you just see everybody small. When someone wants to show something on camera and you want to see what's on camera, if you go to their video image, you'll actually see there are 3 dots. If you click on those 3 dots, you'll actually see pin video. And if you click pin video, their video will become big and it'll stay big on the screen when you're in the speaker view. It won't shift to somebody else. So it lets you kind of, the nice thing about that, if somebody's doing a demonstration, you can have it online. They can be doing the demonstration and everybody can be watching the demo, we can talking about what they're doing and asking questions without having the camera switch around on you on the screen. Just an easy hint while he's getting that going.
That's neat.
What's amazing about this stuff is there's a lot of really cool tools in it that are kind of built into it.
Huh.
The other thing, by the way, is if you share your screen, you have to, if you look at the bottom, there's a button at the bottom that says optimize for video. So if you want to like watch a YouTube video with a group of people, if you click that, it changes the way it sends the video out so that the video is actually tuned to television, which is kind of different, is a different frame rate. And so it actually makes the video quality better.
All right, now I'm looking at this on my iPad.
Yep.
And at the bottom here, it says Joseph's PC's screen. And then on the right side, it's got a blue dot with a video camera in it. That's the only thing that I've got at the bottom of my screen.
Jim, it might be a different interface where you're using a mobile device.
Right.
Okay.
There's slightly different interface on a mobile device because it doesn't jump around. There's actually, if you look somewhere on the screen, there's a way you can look at different views of the meeting, and there'll be a place to change. I have to get my iPad out and look at. I haven't used it on my iPad in a while.
Okay.
Leave on the
I will-
devices, you need to slide to the left or slide to the right.
Yeah, that may be the other thing. You may be on a different screen that you need to get to.
Says under the more at the very top, I can do chat, I can do meeting settings, minimize meeting, raise hand.
Jim, what happens when you slide the whole screen to the left or slide the whole screen to the right?
It moves. On my iPad, it moves where I can position it and see the much greater detail here.
Oh, I think I got the phone set up.
Cool.
Jozef
All right.
phone normally.
All right, let me
Need some
spot.
extra light as well. Let's see if that works. All right. Does that work? Can you see?
Hey, Joseph, if you're going to want to show that model, you might want to just shut the screen share off on the PC because that's overriding everything on my end.
I mixed up that one for now. Does that work?
It's perfect.
Yeah.
We're good.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good idea doing with the camera like this because you can actually zoom in. As you can see, it's a mess. But let me start with the sawmill itself, which is this.
You clearly have no concept of what the word mess really means. Clearly.
I try and keep it tidy because I also have to work here now with everything that's going on. I work at this desk as well during the day with the home job. So this is pretty much the carriage that is. This is the O-scale one, and I just like all the little teeth and all those kind of things. I don't know if you can see my finger, right, that are there that just in O-scale just pop up really nicely when they're barely visible in HO. And I was like, this is all the stuff that I had too much fun modeling in 3D. I kind of want to show them off, and just putting a brake system underneath just because the whole drive carriage system and how it drives the wheels is all underneath there as well. The carriage drive itself, which has its pulleys and everything there, and then this is the same one. This is a slightly This is probably made this one. This is the HO version. This is just for size comparison. This is the HO one. This one is slightly older. I think I built this one about 2 years ago. It was kind of like the first setup, but like some of the details still comes out quite nicely as well compared to the HO one. But the O scale I just enjoyed more doing, and it was a bit less fiddly than that one. This is the whole saw husk that goes with it. So this is actually an actual leather belt. I've managed to find some leather that wasn't too crazy thick. It's probably a bit oversized, but it kind of worked. So it came out really neat. So everything that you see, everything but the wood and like a belt and stuff like that is all 3D printed. So I do my own 3D printing at home. I got an Elgu Mars. A while ago, I had a what you call it before that, a Piopli Moai before that one, but that one is kind of sitting idle now just because it can't quite keep up with what the Mars can do. This one is actually a new bit that I released not too long ago, and it actually goes on top of the sawmill, on top of the other saw husk, sorry, and then you can do a double saw all of a sudden. So I haven't glued this one down yet, but you get the idea. That's kind of what I've been doing there. And what I try and do is, so I like when I first, like people were showing interest, I was like, okay, I kind of need to make this usable. So everything that I do kind of comes with these manuals that I make and then I get printed. So you get whatever's in there if you're HOS or O scale. A little bit of information, and then it's just this booklet has O, S, and HO scale in the same one, so you get the same drawings about 3 times. So it shows you exactly what to cut and when to cut it and how long everything needs to be. And then there's actual templates in there as well to like try and build it all and get it all together. And there's pretty much for every single part. So you got the O scale and the S scale ones there. Just go through it. I'm kind of happy with this one. I just find it, like those kind of drawings I always find nice. They always look kind of interesting, I find. So yeah, it was for me. It was important that if I do sell this stuff, that it's easy for people to put them together as well. I'll keep going around with what else I got. Just
Now, I will say this real quick. I've seen Joseph's stuff before. We have a mutual acquaintance, Kevin.
Yep.
And I've seen his stuff before, and it's fantastic. Now that I see your instructions, you're making me look bad here.
No, I think it's different. Like I think what you're doing is maybe a lot more freehand. At least I find like a lot of the kits that you sell are already on top of a kit bash. So I think people might not necessarily need the instructions. Whereas the way you get the stuff that I send, let me just grab my box of field prints, which of course you get. Like if you buy, for example, the edger planer, you pretty much get a stack of stuff like this, right? Then you have to go and figure out what piece is what and where it all goes. So I think the manual was just something that I wanted to include, so that you know what piece is what, because otherwise, you know, the sawmill comes, I think, is about 50 or 60 different pieces. So just trying to put them together is yeah.
That said, I should probably have you write some instructions for me, because those are
actually, if you're using Fusion, they're actually quite easy to do. I use Fusion, then I just export to PDF, and I just stick them into what you call it? What's it called?
Yeah,
Have you
export
ever
it to a
used
drawing.
Inventor? Have you ever used Autodesk Inventor?
I haven't. No. I got Fusion. I got lucky enough to actually get the. I know they changed their licensing recently, so I applied for the startup and actually was lucky enough to get it. I had to try about 4 times, but the 4th time they kind of gave up and they gave it. I could keep doing what I do, but I haven't used Inventor. No. This one is also kind of new. This is ON30. It's a test. There's still a few issues with it. I'll show you what I'm doing with it later on. It kind of is not all fitting yet. There's a little hook on the chain too, just because. Yeah, this was kind of the first venture into making, you know, rolling stock rather than just kits. This is actually, this model I built in HO scale as one of the first things I did for myself. And I just kind of rebuilt it, and I don't have the old one anymore because it kind of all fell apart after 3 years of me moving around. But yeah, I'm happy. And again, everything, of course, the wheels aren't, the couplers aren't, but everything else is pretty much 3D printed again on there. Let's see what else.
Is the wood laser cut?
No, it's actually, I get them from Mount Albert Skill Lumber. It's just Skill Lumber, so it comes in packs like this.
Oh yeah, because we don't get anything like that in the UK.
Yeah. I think they might actually be selling some of their stuff. I think they have a UK distributor for some of their stuff. There is Mount Albert, and there's a one in the US as well that I forgot the name of, that do similar stuff.
You can buy it through Fast Tracks.
Yeah, I get it through Fast Tracks. Yeah. But because it's being cut in Canada, it's near Toronto that actually cut it. So I don't have to wait to get across the border and stuff. It actually comes straight from Canada. I'll just keep going around a bit. This is the swing cutoff saw. It actually swings. And again, like, yeah, it's just turn around a bit. Let's see. So again, this is all not hooked up yet, but again, you kind of end up, you'll start seeing as I go through it, like these are the rollers, right? So because I modeled the rollers once, it then becomes easy to make just a set of dead rollers. And again, it's just, similar kind of wood, and you just, put it together, same length, and it all comes out just as easy. But you also might need a way of actually transferring your logs from one to the other. So then you add a few bits to it. And this one is actually with a drive gear. So it's overhead or underneath the what you call it, underneath the floorboards that you can actually drive it. I don't have the drive bit anywhere close, but I can show you on 3D in a second. But again, just like it's really just having, for me personally, it's just having fun building all of these things. And this is again the same swing saw in HO scale, and the sawmill here is the HO scale saw husk. I found actually for the belt in HO and even in O scale, if you use sanding paper, like I use 2000 grit sanding paper, which is fairly cheap to get online, and it actually folds really nicely. I used the what you call it, the painter's tape before, but I always ended up with like these little dents. When you try and bend it or try and fold it, you just get these, like, just like when you try and fold paper that isn't quite as flexible, you just get these little divots, and I didn't like it, so I kept on looking. And actually I found that sanding paper, and then 2000 grit actually works really nicely. If you go slightly higher grits, it becomes more flexible. So if you have a smaller scale, that might actually work. But yeah, so that's pretty much all the stuff I have. I just see, this is a test print from the same kit that didn't work. These are some prints that I just got in from Shapeways to try and see if they could actually print it, because if these fall on the ground, they're kind of fragile, right? It works fine for all of these kits, but for the rolling stock, I found that if I drop them too hard, they kind of shatter fairly quickly with the resin that I got. So I was just looking with Shapeways, and I got a few other people trying some test prints as well to print them in a different material that is a bit more rigid and a bit more flexible, so you can actually get the wheels in a bit easier. So yeah, there's like a whole stack of them now sitting on my desk that is like test prints and making sure they roll properly and those kind of things. So that's pretty much it for the models. I can go back to the screen share and actually maybe show you where the details, or how I go about the actual 3D modeling itself, if that's of interest.
Yes.
Just start the screen share again. Let me just move my models out of the way and get my keyboard back.
Now, is the can the models be made operational, or are they all just static?
They're all static. The way I modeled them, they're static. I've had other people ask me if potentially they could be made operational. I'm not sure. I'd love to try, but I don't know if, yeah. Like every bit is modeled individually and modeled after drawings I found online. Vintagemachinery.org is the website where they have like tons and tons of manuals of like these very, very old drawings of like the 1900s, like the actual mechanical drawings. So everything that I do is kind of based on that, and I try and model it in a way so that it actually could be functional. I have just never tried to really make it functional, and with all the different bits and pieces, if I were to send it as a kit, so the first kit had actually everything individual. You had the individual wheels, individual everything, and people just came back and like, this is not fun. It's way too tedious to like, drill a little hole in the flywheel and then put a little axle through it, and so I kind of started making larger parts, but I still got all the individual parts as well, so it could potentially run, but yeah, I have to try. I'd love to try, to be honest.
The next challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Let me just share this screen.
Joseph, what do you use to weather your wood?
It's a mix of what you call it, water, a tiny bit of isopropyl alcohol, Indian ink, Indian ink, the really black stuff, and then just a mix of colors. Usually, I can't remember off the top of my head because I always change it as it empties. But I kind of just pick, I think there's a charcoal gray in there, and just your burnt umbers and those kind of things. And it's just a wash, really. I cut the wood, I dip it in there, let it sit for about 30 minutes. I take it out, and then I clean it off with a towel, or what you call it, a kitchen tissue. That kind of gets it into relatively deep. And then I chuck them back in again, do it about 2 or 3 times, and just shake it up quite a bit, just to keep the colors going. But yeah, that's pretty much all I do to weather it. And then after that, when I finish everything, it's of course the powders and those kind of things, like the grimy black stuff. For painting, like the models themselves, like this one, it's all kind of hand painted. So I don't use an airbrush at the moment. It's all just kind of by hand, using the hairspray technique to get some scratches and those kind of things. I got a fairly harsh like metal brush that I use when I make scratches on metal, those kind of things. I use Vallejo paints for most of the stuff, and I could stick it in an airbrush, but I just find I get a bit more control for the moment if I do it by hand with such small bits. So this is what I'm trying to build myself. So that's currently what I have. Not everything is out yet as a kit itself, but again, this is the overhead log turner. So if you get your logs in, so this is a work in progress at the moment. It's really your log hole that would get your logs in from the pond. Roll it into your sawmill, and then you got your overhead log turner here to actually turn the logs as you cut them. That's the sawmill itself that we saw before. So I really, might at times I go a bit too nuts with some of this stuff. This one doesn't have it, but I try and, for example, on the logging truck here that I'm working on, I went a bit too crazy and actually individually turned every single bolt so that it didn't look as uniform, just because. I didn't like having them all straight. I just kind of like, okay, random, close my eyes and turn it, kind of deal. I've done it with a bunch of the sawmill stuff as well, but yeah, I can see it here on the top saw that I did it. Yeah, it really is just trying to get it all together. Again, this is all the, you got your little sockets to put in your oil. They come out fairly well in O scale. They come out very, very tiny in HO scale, but you can still see them. But again, like the bolts are turned and the gears are there. And then the drive system actually currently sits underneath it. And it's just one of those friction gears that kind of make it turn, and that is all hooked up to a belt system that I have yet to design. If I move too fast, let me know, because I'm very used to just turning, but I know at times my mom looks at this and she's like, "You're making me nauseous, stop it." So so yeah, again, this is, I don't model the chains and those kind of things. I don't really model them. The idea for this one is I actually saw a video. There's a few videos online on YouTube by Mr. Choctaw, who shows the sawmill. I think it's an operational old steam sawmill somewhere in, I believe it's Oregon, but I might be wrong. And they actually have one of these skids where they kind of transfer a log from one to the other. And they have this mechanism where it actually goes up and down. Like they have a handle, and like it kind of lifts the whole gantry, I guess, lifts it up and it just rolls off. But I never found actual images of how those things work. So I kind of went a bit more freehand on that and how I would do it. So that's the mechanism that sits on the floor here, and that's the actual model of it once it's built. Again, I'm not too happy with this yet. There's still a few issues, so I haven't really made it available to anyone yet. So I usually end up building 2 or 3 of them myself before I'm happy with them, and before I put them online for other people to purchase. This is the gang etcher, I think they call them. Again, I'm learning a lot of new terms, both in English and just about forestry in general. Again, like individual teeth here to actually, grip the wood as it goes through the machine. Sliders to actually adjust it all, and then the actual swing saw. Built this little steam engine too, which has, again, the interior in there is built as well, and it all comes out in the prints as well, which at times I'm kind of surprised that it all works. Sometimes not every print works. That's why I got that box with like leftovers of stuff. But again, a lot of this stuff just kind of comes out really nicely with the prints, and then the actual big boiler that goes with it. Again, this is the one. It's based on the one that I saw on one of the YouTube videos. That's that one. So that's currently the sauna, and that's what I've spent most of the time on so far, and then it's getting there. Because it was all based on Vancouver. I don't know if you guys know, but Vancouver is actually built around the Hastings sawmill, which is this guy here. So I'm actually starting to venture into, hey, I kind of want the buildings as well. Now you kind of go out of ON30 at this scale, I think, and you kind of get in more into actual O scale. But again, I kind of want to see if I can make the buildings. I'm talking with actually Sculptio, which is who Dylan uses as well. They do some laser cutting. I'm just trying to see if I can get some of the frames and those kind of things laser cut, and then I got a stack of wood sitting here with panels and stuff to try and build it. The real idea is, and I go, there you go.
I will say this on the Sculptio. The laser cutting, what I've had them do for me so far is I've had them laser cut clear acrylic lenses for like my headlight kits.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that, using that for a window set for a box cab I've got coming. The only thing I've got to make sure is you basically can't have any clearances in your design. I learned this by accident. So originally the lenses for my headlights, I had them 3D printed. I just did them myself. I just did them in a clear resin. So there was a little lip around them and they would press fit in. Perfect. I put in 1/10 of a millimeter of clearance. Well, the problem is that's basically the clearance you get with the laser.
Okay.
So I basically double my amount of clearance.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you really got to keep in mind. But that said, from what I've gotten with them, they've been good to me to begin with. They've done the prints I've gotten from them have basically been excellent. I think I only just got my first broken print, and it really wasn't their fault. It kind of got crushed.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the shipping side. That ain't their fault, but it is what it is. They do very, very good stuff. Now,
the stuff I got from them is good. The issues I had with it is a lot of the details that I make are kind of too small for them. So I have to start scaling them up. I have to make things thicker, and then it throws me off personally. Like maybe some people won't notice, but it kind of bugs me. So I'm still working with them to try and see what kind of the limits are and how far I can push them.
I basically figured out their limitations for like rivet size by accident. Okay. So when I got my first set, I have them print cabs for me too for locomotives. And what I figured out is, okay, my regular size when I was printing them myself, I did just a 1/2 millimeter sphere and put it on the surface of the object.
Yeah.
Problem, when you're let's say you have it polished, which basically they just put it through a tumbrel that has ceramic beads in it, and it basically just cleans up the surface, makes it nice and smooth. Problem is, that's basically what it takes off the surface. Yeah. So you're basically wiping out any rivets at that size. So you need bare minimum of 0.75 millimeter rivet if you want it to show up at a small size.
Yeah.
I have just gone to universal 1 millimeter rivets because the polishing takes enough of it off and they look good anyway.
Yeah. The issue I had with what they were doing. So if I look in here, right, I got these teeth in there that are modeled in there, and I had to make them a millimeter thick, but like the clearance at that point was so little that it just became one blob. And you can't see any of the details in there anymore. So
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I have to see what I do with that. But yeah, I'll figure something out. But yeah, it is those kind of tiny little details that you don't necessarily see the first time when you look at it. But then when you get a closer look and you start really looking at the models, you really start seeing all the tiny little bits that are in there. Same for these teeth. They don't get them with the multi-jet fusion that they use. You can get it if you do a resin print with them, but their resin prints are like, if I were to go with their resin prints, I would have to double, almost triple the price of the kits. And the main reason I kind of got into this and started selling them was because I don't have to make money off this personally. I enjoy doing it. I do it for fun. And I kind of want other people to have that same kind of fun. And I don't want them to have, to need $1,000 to buy this entire kit. That kind of, for me personally, took the fun away when I first started looking at this. And yeah, if you then start looking at, getting it professionally printed versus what I can do at home, one, I have to change the details so that actually they can print it. And then two, I have to double, sometimes triple the price. So yeah, I have to see what I do there, but I'll come up with something as we go.
One of the things I have noticed, I'll agree with you on the resin printing. It is hugely expensive through them. I think it's because they're using some sort of different machine. Like they call it jet printing. The way I understand it is it almost sounds like it's spraying something. That's what it almost sounds like to me.
Yeah, that's what I've figured. I saw. I think it's a similar thing. I think they spray the bed and then they have this UV light that goes over top of it, that just like hardens it in the spots where it needs to harden it to actually get the models, and then you get the same kind of layers. The advantage that they have is that they don't have to do the support. So when you actually get the model back, you don't get this, right? You don't end up with someone having to spend an hour cutting out all the supports, which is really the bit I was hoping to simplify, because it's very tedious to do. But
it's going to take experimentation. Like there's some things I've stumbled on with Sculpteo that just turned out to be home runs. Like I can, like the cabs, the trucks I do, which MJF is great for that because it's a tough material.
Yeah, these guys
for the super fine detail,
really nice.
The super fine detail is where you run into trouble.
Yeah.
Like I'm talking super fine, like what you do here. Like I said, I've seen your stuff. To say it's fantastic would probably be underselling it.
Thanks.
It's excellent. You're basically one of the best designers I know, period.
Oof.
Yes, I know that's coming from me, but the fact is, I look at what you do here. I look at the amount of detail you put in there. Like what I do, I try to focus on the big picture and try to set it up so somebody can detail it. But what you do is you're basically doing their homework for them. And that's not a bad thing. That's great because it just makes it easier on the modeler. Because instead of having to go through and fiddle with it, they can just go ahead and paint it and they're good to go.
Yeah.
You seriously, even just looking at your designs, like with the art, with the disconnect, going in and turning each individual bolt head at a different angle, that's nothing I would have ever considered.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be totally upfront. Like my Thielsen trucks that I've got sitting downstairs, I just did regular bolt heads. I didn't think, let's turn them like that. I didn't think of that. But that's what it would really look like.
At the same time, like I probably have about maybe 10 bolts on that disconnect, where I think yours probably has a few more. So going in manually and changing all of them might be a bit overkill. But yeah, it is something I enjoy doing, and it is something. And I think some of that is the visual effects background and those kind of things where you get it on a movie screen and people probably won't notice because there's motion blur, there's explosions, there's everything around it. But there's that little little enjoyment of knowing that you have done it. And if someone picks it up, you know, you go on Rotten Tomatoes, for example, you see like, oh, did you see that? And you're like, yeah. You know, those kind of things. So that's what I want to do with this stuff as well. It's just trying to get those tiny little bits in there that if someone looks at it, it's like, okay, this looks cool. And then looks at it again, like, oh, actually, did you notice this? Or, hey, did you notice that? And just kind of want people to be able to look at a model more than once and just trying to, yeah.
Well, in that respect, you succeeded wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
I honestly believe you have. Like I said, I look at what you're doing here, and having seen it myself, you know, listening to you explain it, dude, I can't say it enough. You basically have killed it with a lot of this stuff.
Thank you.
The level of detail is amazing. And it's pretty clear to me that you give a crap about what you're doing.
Yeah, I think.
But you're also taking that background that you have and you're putting it to work. Like, I don't have that background. A lot of what I've done, I've had to learn myself.
Yeah.
You know, it took me for, you know, my first thing was, oh, I'll just build it myself. Yeah, I can't scratch build to save my life.
Yeah.
But I look at what you basically you really have taken this to another level. You have.
Thanks.
I am wholeheartedly willing to say that because, again, it's right in front of me. I'm not going to say it's not because I'd be lying.
It's nice to hear again. You know, like it's great. Again, like I started out and everything. Like if you Google my name in YouTube, you'll find one of my demo reels from 2009 that I did to try and get my first job. And I look at that now, and it kind of makes my eyes bleed. It's like, oof, oh, this is bad. But again, that was 10 years ago. And so yeah, over time, you know, you just improve and what I find interesting is with this 3D printing, you kind of have to think about how you're going to print it as well. There's various bits that, and I think you must have seen that as well with the cabs that you design. You don't always some of this, like when you make it, like for example on the boiler, let me just go in. So again, going slightly overkill with the bolts in here, but I noticed that. I noticed that, you know, when you start 3D printing, you pretty much, you know, you build a layer, it goes layer by layer by layer, and everything that comes up first that's not connected to everything needs to have these supports, like it needs to have these little bits here to make sure that it actually holds onto something when you print it. And I started doing that, and I had all these bolts on the underside. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to put sorry. Let me just open the boiler in a separate view. As you see, as I go, I now have a collection of parts that I can reuse and actually start making things a lot faster.
So the little like divots or holes, is that did you add something onto that, or is that did you create that into the boiler?
These things?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they are it's a sphere pretty much, and you just tell Fusion, hey, I got a sphere. Yeah. This is the cylinder that I want it on. I want 50 of them, and I will place them. And you can kind of do this. What you call it? They call it a pattern. So it's a circular pattern. So it makes it a lot easier, right? Because you can distribute them evenly. You don't have to do one by one. And you then do a rectangular pattern to actually get them to go up and down. But yeah, what I noticed is, you know, you have to do that, but no one is going to notice that if I zoom in here, that, come on.
Okay. Does the spheres or whatever, does that ever come out, when you 3D print, does it ever come out like bad or whatever? Have you had any issues with that?
Spheres, not so much. I've had issues with stuff not being properly supported and it will just not attach and you just get a print that's broken in half. This guy had it like this. This is the disconnect in the first print. This bit here wasn't properly supported, so it kind of just teared off. And then you realize fairly quickly, okay, I need to put more supports there the next time I print it. You can see I got prints right on. So this is the boiler just by itself. It's a bit easier to browse through that. So what I noticed is no one is going to notice that actually these bolts here at the bottom are ever so slightly embedded into this, which means that when it comes up in the print, so you print it upside down, this comes printing first, and this doesn't form an island anymore because it actually is attached to it. But the clearance anyway in O scale, you know, it would be this, but this in real life, it looks very big, but this is about 0.5 millimeter. Sorry, I don't know inches, so I don't know what it is in inches. Sorry for that. But it's minuscule, and you can see it. But you know, I haven't had anyone notice the difference between this one and this one on the print. But it avoids me having to put 15 different supports here just for every single bolt. And the bolts actually come out a lot cleaner and a lot nicer when you actually do it this way, rather than having supports. Just because with the support, you get this little dent that you then have to clean off. So that's the various little bits and tricks that you learn as you go, and you're like, oh man, I don't want to support this with 5,000 supports because it's not going to be usable for anyone. And it's those kind of little bits and pieces that over time you kind of get used to.
Log back.
You start incorporating them as you go. Now the thing that got this all started a long time ago was actually the Shay. So this is I haven't finished this. Like there's nothing on this side. But I started and this is what got me into the whole logging side of things. Like I didn't know a Shay. I didn't know what a Shay was 3 years ago. We don't have them in Europe. Like they don't exist. So when I got here and I started looking into this, I kind of fell in love with this thing, and I was like, man, this will be awesome to build, but this is really just a side project for the time being. And again, going slightly nuts on the details, but this is kind of what got it all started. And every once in a while, I work on it. Like this is the actual undercarriage at the moment. That's starting to get there, and I'm trying to find a way to get the spoked wheels because I can't find anyone that's actually selling them and those kind of things. But yeah, this is really what got me into actually making the logging materials and the logging machinery, and that actually took off fairly quickly because they're fairly straightforward to build. Whereas this, I kind of want it to be a lot more accurate. So I got a bunch of books now laying around with how they actually fit together. I've been talking to the what you call it. The foundation, I don't know if foundation is the right name, but there's like this Shay Foundation where they have a bunch of drawings. I've been talking to those guys as well, just to see like, hey, what am I doing wrong? What am I missing? And they've actually been very responsive, which is kind of nice because they're like, hey, if this is a 3D model, then it might be interesting for us to actually get a turntable where they get the 3D, not the 3D print, but actually get the model itself, so they can show it to people like, hey, yeah, on a digital screen or whatever, they can like go into this and show it to people how it all fits together for people that can't come and look at the shapes themselves. So that's a side project at the moment. We'll see how long it takes me to finish this one. I suspect a few years.
No, that's a standard gauge one, isn't it?
Yeah, this is standard gauge for now. I didn't know what ON30 was up until a year and a half ago. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff to do here, but yeah, this is standard gauge. And I guess I'll show this one as well, which is the website where I get all of my, the majority of my ideas from. And people might now go, oh, okay, this is how you actually make everything. You're pretty much just copying, but. This is from this is a publication is 1910, and whoever runs this site just has tons and tons of these kind of manuals that or catalogs that they scan in as they go. I'll just scroll down. Sorry for. Yeah. So if you look at the where is it? If you look at this guy, right, the saw husk, you notice that the system that's inside of it is pretty much this guy, right? It's these types of drawings where I tend to go from. They have minimal information generally on the size of things, but just enough to kind of get a frame of reference of like, okay, the biggest flywheel here is this size. Scale that down to O scale, and then kind of I eyeball a lot of it to be like, okay, this is kind of how the proportions fit. But yeah, that's how I find a lot of the inspiration for the kits and the models that I build. It is from these old catalogs. The drawings in here are just amazing, and just looking at them gets me excited to just build some of it. So yeah, it's a free website. Like, you can go there. They got tons and tons of manuals on there. It's literally hundreds. You can search by company. You can search by what you're interested in as well. It's the publication reprints here. There's the photo index and the images, and I think there's a forum as well where people actually restore the actual models. They have bought an old. I think I saw one for one of the steam engines, and they show the photos of them restoring it, and they use these kind of catalogs and these manuals to try and get all the information they need to actually machine the parts themselves. So they machine them in actual size. So you get a lot of information on here, which is really, really useful. Yeah, that's pretty much what I've been up to for the last 2-3 years. I got a whole bunch of other stuff in my head, like, you know, the sawmill itself. Like, this is a sawmill building, but you know, there's a planing mill in here. There's a machine shop in there. The boiler house, now I got the boiler already. That I kind of want to start building and start laying out, and yeah, just start building all of those kind of, you know, what goes into machine shop, but what machinery goes in there to try and, you know, repair some of the stuff from the sawmill. Yeah, that's really what I hope to get to eventually as time goes by. Yeah, there's just a whole bunch of stuff still in my head that I try to get out. So
yeah. Do you plan to offer the buildings as kits?
That's the idea, yeah. So the sawmill, I'm starting to lay out the building. The thing that I'll probably do with those is for the framework of the just the Hastings sawmill, just the actual the building, what I've got so far. This is this is probably again too much detail for what actually is going to be. I got a bigger one as well that I started building, but the idea is to get all the framing in there as I go. And I think the framing itself, I'll get laser cut, and I will sell those with the kit, and then I'll sell the plans with it. But I don't think there's any point unless people really specifically ask it. Like, I got these planks of wood, right, which is the you know, the lumber that I use for the siding and those kind of things. I don't think there's any point in me ordering a whole ton of this and then packaging it up again and then shipping it to someone when they can probably get it in the US or in Canada as well. Again, it's a bit trickier because I got people in Australia that are interested, and I now see people from the UK as well on here that might not have access to it. So there might be two options there. One is like, hey, this is the price I pay for the wood, so I'm just going to add that price to what I have. I don't have to make money on the wood. And just sell it like that. But a lot of people, I think, might have a bunch of wood kicking around already that they can probably just use themselves.
Hey, Joseph, just a suggestion.
Yep.
Why don't you give a call to the Fast Tracks Mount Albert guys and offer to partner with them?
Okay.
I mean, what you're doing is doing all the stuff they don't do very well. Yeah. They have all the wood and stuff, and they do kits. And I bet they would love a partnership to do some of the things you're doing as a partnership. You might give them a call and talk to them. I mean, I think there should be a lot more of that in this hobby, because the thing that's so interesting about this hobby now is if you look at building a sophisticated kit, you have to bring together 3D printing and laser cutting and traditional wood and other pieces in order to build something like that. And you have different people with different skills. The guys who maybe have the wood skills don't necessarily have the 3D skills. So if you guys could work together as Canucks, I was the CTO of Nortel's enterprise business for 10 years. So I'm kind of a honorary Canadian, I guess, semi. But anyway, I'd call them up. They do some really cool kits, and they might be really interested in, maybe you even have a package where you give them some of the stuff for the wood and they sell a wood plan and you sell the 3D plan and they go together to build something really cool. Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah, that's a good thought actually. I'll reach out to them as soon as I have this a bit more solidified, like the sawmill or the building itself, and actually have something where I would need a lot more wood. Because for now, the kits that I do sell, they come with the wood included, and I just get I get the wood in bulk, and whatever they charge me is what I sell it back or what I include in the price for the kit. But yeah, that's actually a good idea to reach out to them and see what they can do there. 'Cause, yeah, it's a shame really that that there's not more collaboration there. So I'll give that a try. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So how about printing these in N scale, or instead of the wood, you just print the beams as well?
Hold on, let me turn on my phone again. So my dad, I don't know if he's still here. My dad actually joined. It's 1 a.m. for them. Don't know if they're still kicking around or not. But he does N scale, and I'm like, here, there you go. See if I can get the video back up.
Yeah, turn off the screen sharing.
Yep, good point. Is the camera from the phone working? Oh, not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see the phone screen? Is that working?
Looking straight in your face.
No.
All right. There you go. This is the sawmill in
There you go.
in N scale.
Okay.
Wow.
But that's the whole thing. Like, there's no point in actually getting people the wood and having them build this.
Exactly. That's my point. How much you want to sell that for? I could use
You
one.
got a buyer.
And yeah, I yet have to ship it to my dad. But yeah, it's surprising. I was really surprised when it came out. I was like, this is never ever going to work. This is so tiny that it just, yeah, it's and the camera doesn't do it justice. Like it can't focus because it's so tiny, and I'm really shaky because I'm trying to hold everything. Wait, actually, let me put it down on the desk. Let's see if we can get it better.
Yeah, I think you could sell that in N scale as is. We don't expect it to work, but it sure looked nice on our forestry product layouts.
Yeah. It's yeah, I was really surprised when it came out, but like this stuff is so tiny that it doesn't the handles don't really stand straight because it's so thin that it kind of just curves over time. That's the main reason why I haven't really put it up. Is like I'm not 100% satisfied with it, and then I feel bad for like selling it to people. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
How about what about shapeways in metal?
So the issue I have with that one is a lot of the details are too small. So this piece, for example, are so small that they're like, well, no, it needs to be 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters. I think for metal is even 2. It needs to be 2 millimeters thick, and then a lot of the detail just kind of disappears. You could do it for G or F scale. I could scale that up, but then I don't think the price would be particularly interesting anymore. The price they would already charge for the sawmill and O scale in metal. I had to look at it about like $200 or $300 to get it printed. So, yeah, and then a lot of the detail I think will just be gone, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah. But the levers won't bend though.
That's true. Yeah, there's a metal, or there's a what you call it, the MGF stuff, the multi-jet fusion that gives these things, and I think that's what Dylan uses as well. They actually can inject them with glass beads to make it more rigid, which could be interesting. I don't know how fragile it is. I haven't done a break test with this one yet, as in I haven't tried smashing it on the floor yet. Something I do tend to do just to see how fragile it is.
Just a heads up, I have tried the oops, I dropped it test.
Yeah.
With the nylon. I'll be honest with you. like my trucks, for instance, just manhandling them, I couldn't break them. Dropping it on the floor, couldn't break them. If something gets crushed in shipment, okay, that is what it is.
Yeah.
That's when it gets crushed under a 500-pound box or crate or whatever, or run over by a forklift, which I'm sure has happened.
Yeah.
It is what it is. At that point, you just deal with it.
Yeah.
But like I said, the regular MJF, even without the glass reinforcement, works incredibly well.
Yeah.
So I've been having one of my arch bar trucks. I gave him a set to Larry Burke, which if you guys, some of you might know the name, some of you might not. He's on Facebook. Look him up. He fantastic modeler. But I went to him and I said, "Hey, would you torture test one of these trucks for me?" So I sent him a pair of trucks. He's like, "Dude, what am I supposed to do here? I can't even break them."
Yeah.
and he's been running them in op sessions and everything. And he's like, and I've checked with him every so often. Hey, how are they doing? And he's like, dude, they're interchangeable with the Bachmann ones.
Yeah.
I've got nothing. I can't complain.
Yeah.
So
that's what I really like about the MGF stuff. Like it is rock solid. Like the resin ones for rolling stock is just a bit too fragile. It's too easy to break or shatter. Just the general resin stuff. The printed hole resin, I should say. I think
resin, and you probably noticed this too, is sometimes you have stuff that you print on a printer and it just warps no matter what you do.
Yep.
I had a Forney conversion I did for Bachmann's Porter, and no matter what I did, the rear frame would warp. So what I did when I shipped them is I shipped them on the sprues. Well, they warped and separated from the sprues in some cases.
Yeah.
So it comes down to a question of, well, what can you do? One of the things I've noticed is MJF is good for making a master. It's rigid. It holds the major detail stuff well.
Yeah.
Fine detail stuff, okay, it's not the best for it. But for your average Joe Schmo modeler, it works perfectly fine.
Yeah.
One of the things I've done is it's also a matter of how you have something resin cast. So some of the HO scale guys might recognize the name Bruce Gavin. He's the guy who owns Pacific Northwest Resins. He does casting work for me, and all I did is I gave him a 3D printed master. What we found is that the MJF masters work phenomenally better than just the straight resin prints that I did, because they hold their shape. So the mold doesn't like push something out as it's curing. It holds on to the shape and it works. There's some stuff that I've sent him, like he's got the box cab now. I know he also got sick, so he's like, "Hey, I'm sorry," and I'm like, "No, don't. I'm not the center of the universe.
Yeah.
If I was, we'd have a bigger problem on our hands." It also, when it comes to resin casting, there's also different types of resins that are out there. I don't know exactly what Bruce uses, but I have not been able to get his castings to warp. I actually tried. I left one of them out in the sun last summer to see if it would warp, and it didn't. It held its shape. And part of that comes down to, I think, the method he's using. He's making an injection mold out of a vulcanized rubber. But it's also the resin. And like I said, I couldn't get it to work.
Yeah.
Now, maybe I was dumb lucky, and who knows, maybe somebody else who's gotten something from it was like, "Yeah, I've seen stuff of his work." Well, it's a resin casting. It's, it happens.
Yeah.
But if you're struggling to figure out how to reproduce it for cost-wise, it may not be a bad idea to look at resin castings. It's just a question of what resin do you use. Like the white stuff from Glenmark works very well. Obviously, my only recommendation is have somebody who's an expert do it.
Yeah.
Because resin casting isn't difficult. It's time consuming. When I first started, I did a slope back tender, and Well, I came out with it and I had 30 people in the span of, I'd like to say a couple hours. It took me 2 weeks to get those all out the door.
Yeah.
So if you can find somebody who's a professional, just go to the professional.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yep.
But there's going to be some stuff that you do that is going to lend itself better to resin casting. That's just my experience.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm looking at, because as you said, like, I'm having a harder time keeping up with the orders that are coming through. Like I got 2 Elgu Marses printing almost full time, and by the end of the week, like what I made is then gone. And then I still got Kevin who sends me a message, hey, I need more, which is always great. But yeah, there's some stuff there where I'm like, hey, I need to see if I can do this nicer and a bit more streamlined. And casting is definitely something that I have in the back of my head where, like, hey, a saw blade that is flat like this, that flat saw blade that is perfectly castable, and it takes forever to print on a 3D printer because it's so big. You have to print it like layer by layer, and it stands up, right? If you lay this flat, it will actually warp. If you print this like laying down like this, it will actually just warp, just because of the shear the shearing force when it actually pulls it off the build blade. But flat like that's perfect for casting. I think, like, just should be.
Oh, you're absolutely right. That'd be a slam dunk to cast.
Yeah. So that's
the only other thing I could think of, and I'm drawing a blank right now. God damn it. I totally forgot what I was just going to say.
And it gets better with age.
That said, like I said, resin casting is going to lend itself to some of what you do.
Yeah.
But looking at what you're going to have to outsource stuff eventually. Yeah. I had to do it because I couldn't keep up with it. Yeah. And if people would stop texting me, that'd be great. But you come to a point where eventually you can't just do it yourself. No, but there's not enough time in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
If there was enough time in the day, I would be rich by now.
Yeah.
But I'm not, because there's not enough time in the day. Like for instance, when you're balancing projects, once you get enough going, it's a balancing act. Some of the stuff has to get pushed to the side while you work on other stuff. That is what it is.
Yep.
It's annoying because when you look at it and it's something that's like, oh, it's going to sell. But the problem is, and Kevin may have said this to you too. He says it to me all the time. No pay attention. Now, I basically do this as a business. And part of that is not just for the challenge, it's for a justification to it. Because if I wasn't doing it, if I can't do it successfully, what's the point of me doing it?
Yeah, for sure.
So what I have to look at is if I have 30 some odd people coming to me about a kit, like the Tom York kit that I just got my hands on, that's one I have to put to the front of the line. To hell with everything else. Because when you've got 30 people who are waving money at you, you got to get up and you got to make sure that they're taken care of.
Yeah.
Now, there's still you still got to go through the process. Like what I do is I do some test kits, send them out to people I know and say, build it and tell me what's wrong. Yeah. So far, I haven't had much come back wrong, just moreover stuff warped. Yeah. But nothing wrong with the assembly process, which is my goal, is I want to make sure the assembly process is good. Once you figure that out, and that's why you need other people, because I've built my own models before, but the problem is I'm one person. Yeah. You never know what somebody can screw up or what somebody else might run into because they have a different method to their madness. Because let's be totally honest, when it comes to running a business like this, it takes a level of insanity. And I'm serious. It takes a level of crazy to do what we do. And it's not just for the sake of doing it. It's for putting yourself out there. It's trying to figure out how to make something work. It's the effort that goes into it, and then being able to stand up and say, yeah, I did that, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
You know, you got to be able to stand up and say that. So it does take a level of crazy to do it.
Yes.
But I think it's a good mark on you that you're willing to do it. The fact is, the hobby is changing. I've known this for a while now. You know, this is my second year doing this, but you see more and more people are starting to come into it to supply the hobby, not just in O scale, but in just about every scale.
Yep.
You know, the technology's changing, so we can make stuff more accurate. You know, instead of trying to scratch build a master, you can now print that master.
Yep.
You know, instead of trying to make something so complicated that you're basically assembling it with with forceps and micro tweezers and, you know, jeweler's screws. Instead of doing that, you can print it as a single assembly.
Yeah.
It makes everyone's life that much easier. Now, is there cost involved with that? Absolutely. Like, as you've probably seen, Joseph, there's some stuff that costs through the nose to print.
Yeah.
So you have to price that accordingly. But at the same time, it's where does that line for acceptability fall? For me, if it's north of $30 in my cost, I'm going to be kind of skeptical on what I would sell. But that's when you're having somebody else print it. When you're controlling the printing process yourself, it's a lot easier. Now, do you basically need a print bank to do it? Yeah, you do, but it's doable. And it's basically push a button and check on the machine every so often to make sure everything's working right. I've had plenty of failed prints in my time because I went to bed and in that 12 hours while I wasn't paying attention to it, like I've had an LED screen fail. I've had main boards just go kaput. We've had a power outage and it fried the printer. You know, I've had that stuff happen.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, it all boils down to you need to have a level of crazy to do it. Because again, you're putting yourself out there. You're basically standing up in front of the masses, sword and shield ready, basically leading the charge. You know, it's not so much. It's the little guys like us that can respond to stuff that people want. We can do it quickly.
Yeah.
You look at people like Bachman, and Athern, and Atlas, and they do good. There's no doubt in my mind. When you look at their products, they're very well designed. But how long does it take somebody like them to go from idea to built product? It takes them years. Whereas me and you, we can do it in probably a couple days.
Yeah, I had that with the disconnect. Where did I put it?
Yeah, I'll leave you guys to it because it's 1 o'clock in the morning here.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Yeah, nice meeting you, Dave.
Cheers, yeah. See you later.
I had it with this disconnect. You know, I don't know if you can see that properly, but there's this little attachment to attach the brake beam pretty much. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna do it with a real chain. So I had my chain out, and I tried to attach it, and I spent 2 hours trying to get the chain through the little hook, and I was like, no. I spent, I think, about 5 minutes in Fusion, and then about 15 minutes printing, and I printed 4 brackets that did the same thing as the chain did, and I was done. And it's those kind of things that for me make 3D printing in this hobby like really worthwhile. And if I would, otherwise I would have had to go to a store and go and buy it and go and figure it out. No, I just sit on the computer, 5 minutes to model it. Okay, other people might take longer, but it's fairly straightforward. It's a loop and 2 boxes. Stick it on the printer and you get it out. And like it took 15 minutes to print, and I wasted 2 hours trying to get a chain on that. Within half an hour, I then ended up printing. And it actually looks better than with the chain, to be honest. Just because I could add the little bolt in the that would actually look like it was actually drilled into the wood beam and those kind of things. I think that is like you said, Dylan. That's I think where the hobby is going, and more people are there's the 3D printing group for trains. And in the last 6 months has just exploded with the amount of people that are joining. And everyone's trying to print things, and everyone's trying stuff out, and everyone is sharing what they're doing. It's just amazing to see what everyone really is up to, and how quickly people can go from an idea, like you said, Dylan, to an actual, physical object that they can then use.
Right now, like I said, me and you, we could do this quick. There's only one other company that I know of right now that's using 3D printing in their actual production process, and that's Bowser. Okay. Like they're printing like plows, horns. They're just printing them in their shop, so that way they have the spare parts and they're using them on their models. Like they'll send them over the assembly side and they'll build them, and they look very good. Then they started doing like loads, and then one of their guys did a Sherman tank with it. You could see the track links to it, the sprocket wheel, stuff that when you stand next to a tank, which I know we're train guys, but stuff like that you'll pick out. I think we're going to start seeing more and more of it. The problem that we face with 3D printing though is you can't print a mechanism yet, at least not one that works well. Yeah. You can print the frame for the mechanism, but you can't make the gears. You can't make the wheels, or at least the full wheels. Not yet. I have a theory on that. Knowing that there's actually a guy over in England that does custom tires. So my thought was, well, just print a wheel and just press fit the tire onto it. Yeah. So there's some ideas there that could work out, and I think it'll make our lives a lot easier. Yeah. But you're going to see the small guys leading the charge. We're basically going to be the front lines as this hobby changes. Yeah. I got into this for the fun of it too. It did turn into a business, and one that I'm very happy that the decision I made, because the amount of people that I like to tell people I've got some of the best customers in the world. Is that probably overblowing it? Well, yeah, because I don't know everyone in the world. There's physically too many people in the world for me to ever meet. But I'll have customers that they're like, hey, if you need this, I have copies of like drawings. They'll send me drawings, they'll send me reference photos. If they know I'm working on something, they just get it for me. And I think that's the other side of it, is because us smaller guys, somebody looks at us and they go, oh, I can talk to him. Yeah. Whereas you look at somebody like Atlas or Athern or Bachman, it's like, I can talk to them, but I don't think they're going to listen. Not to say that they probably wouldn't. I think if you have a really good idea, somebody's going to go, there's an idea. But you'd have to have that. You'd have to hit the right person, and it's basically luck of the draw. Whereas us smaller guys, we can figure it out. Like I said, the biggest thing is a mechanism. Like some of the locomotives I'm doing, I use a trolley mechanism that I get from a company called Halling out of Europe. And I import the drives. I sell the drives separately. I'm using the drives with kits, and admittedly, with the shipping situation as it is, it's basically become a mess in getting drives. And that is what it is when planes aren't flying, you can't get stuff quickly. One of the things I've noticed, especially with like the MJF printing, is if we were to make a frame, you don't need necessarily a complicated mechanism. What is it when it comes to anything, whether it be making like your sawmill work? What is it you really need? You need some spur gears, you need a drive shaft, maybe a flywheel in there somewhere, and some sort of motor. Well, you don't necessarily need a die-cast frame. Now, the die-cast frame is great for weight, but you can add a lead block into that if you absolutely have to. Like if you're making a kit locomotive, you could just throw everything together and say, listen, you've got to put the weight here, just glue it in place and you're good to go. But let's say you try to make that sawmill work. You've already got the separate parts for it. The biggest thing is until the printers get to the point where the gears are accurate enough, that's where you're going to find trouble. Yeah. They're getting there. They honestly are. It's right now, like MJF prints are borderline usable for mechanical parts. And I say borderline just because from what I've seen from people testing them and trying them out on their own, yeah, I'd say within a year or two, somebody's going to come up with a new machine that's faster and more accurate. Yeah. And that's going to make all of our lives easier because once you can figure out the gears, okay, you can get a metal drive, you can get a metal axle made pretty cheaply. You can get the wheels. You don't necessarily need a metal wheel, a full metal wheel, but you need a metal tire. Mm-hmm. So can you get those wheel centers and just press them onto a tire? And then you can make wheels for whatever you need. Like if you have that one locomotive that had a box block driver on the center and then spoked wheels or whatever, you can do that, especially if it's that one weird wheel that they made one of and it has one hole in one wrong place because somebody was off by like an inch or something when they were casting it. And they're like, oh, it still works. Who knows? You're still good. Yeah. We're basically going to be the front line of this, whether we like it or not. So the way I see it is let's embrace the crazy now, because by the time the technology catches up, we're going to be in a position to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you see it already with the 3D printers, like the Elgu Morris printers. Like it takes 8 to 10 seconds per layer to get it done. There's now, they're changing the screens and they go full monochrome screens, and all of a sudden a layer takes 2 seconds. So what would have taken me, now it takes me 15 minutes divided by about 10. And that's the time it will take to print the thing going forward. And those kind of speed improvements are going to be crazy. And more of that stuff is coming out every single day, and it's just really interesting to see.
Like the big thing that I noticed with printers, like the technology, is I've got an Epax X10 sitting downstairs in my garage. Great printer. I love it. Now, I haven't used it in a while because it's in the garage. And the garage, even though it's heated, when you turn the heat on and say, hey, I'm printing, people tend to shut the heat off anyway when nobody's in there. For obvious reasons, let's be honest. If nobody's using the garage, why keep the heat running? Yeah. But even I've noticed, like Epax has gone, and they just released the X10, and 2 months later, they had an upgrade to bring up to double the resolution on the print screen. Yeah. It was like $100 or something like that screen, and then you had to reflash your board. Okay, that's a 10-minute job. That's good. This is very good. And I know I'm droning on here, but we're like I said, we're basically going to be the front line of this. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are going to come to realize that something they don't necessarily understand is going to make their lives a lot easier once they figure out what it does. You don't necessarily need to know how it works. Let's be honest, there are things about the printing that I don't quite understand myself. It's a learning curve.
In many ways, guys, this is exactly the same as YouTube, right? If you think about video and content and entertainment, 30 years ago, it was 3 television stations. Then we began to see with cable a whole bunch more. Now, virtually everyone can be their own movie producer. I mean, between the tools you have an iPhone or you can get online. And basically the same thing's happening. When the tools that you're using to do this get easier and easier to use, and the production methods are becoming easier and more available. It's a really interesting concept. Because what's interesting is, in the past, the design and that documentation was not the biggest part of the cost of a project. It was the tooling and the things to go into production. So if you look at the cost of producing something, the cost of producing the design and the manual and all that was a little piece over here. The cost of producing the tooling to build in volume where you could actually build it and deploy it was huge. The difference is the 3D printing is bringing that cost of production down dramatically for small volumes. You don't have to pay the initial tooling costs. And that makes small batch, it's no different. I mean, if you think about magazines, think about anything where you've gotten this micro targeting. I mean, Joseph, you think about what you're building and you think about it from just modelers, just take all the model railroaders, what percentage are really interested in old logging? And you're able, the thing that's really interesting about this, and this is happening in a lot of technologies, we're now able to micro target because the cost of production has come down so dramatically and the cost of implementation has actually come down. So it's taking your knowledge base and turning it into something. You can do it for a fraction of the cost of what it cost to do 15 years ago. And that's this democratization of certain processes. It's a very interesting concept. Anyway, I'm sorry, I shouldn't do those things on a Saturday. It's too deep and complex, but I always see these interesting correlations between how, it's kind of like if you think about it back in the, there was this time when the only music you ever got to hear was that which was vetted by the music companies. And then we've gotten to the now where if you look at a significant percentage of the new music stars don't come through the music companies, they come through viral success on YouTube. Yeah. And it's a fundamental different access mechanism. You guys are able to access and do things today that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, the cost to do what you did, to implement it, to get from your designs in your head and on paper to producing it would have been $1 million. Now you can do it on a 3D printer for $1,000. It's a very interesting thought process about how it changes relationships and things, how things get done. Anyway, that's said. Sorry.
No, don't. Sorry. It's the interesting bit, and it's what I find interesting about it as well, right? It's the technology side of things. Like the artsy side is one thing, it's something I enjoy doing. I'm a software engineer at heart, so there is a technical side that I enjoy doing as well. And this is really just that perfect combination of all those things together. I can if one day I'm like, oh, I just want to work with my hands, I just want to build something, I just go into that box with all the filled prints and I see what I got laying around that isn't completely broken, and I just start playing around with stuff, and this is actually kind of cool. Okay, now let's go onto the computer and build it in 3D again. Get all the parts because I got them in that list now. I can just kind of chunk them together and get an actual model and then print it again. And it's that combination of things, and at the same time learning how a 3D printer works and how the technology underneath that works, and hey, how can I optimize this? Oh, actually, this is a network port. That means I should be able to drive it from my computer rather than having to walk over to it to push a button. It's those kind of bits that also are, to me, very interesting as part of the hobby in a way.
Quick question with the tires that the guy makes. Do they make it in what scales do they do?
Well, from the research I've done with the guy that I found, it's a guy over in England. I have to pull the link up, but in theory, he can make them in just about any size. So
even like Proto 87?
Yeah, I think he could. He could do it to whatever profile you need. He's got the tooling for it. I need to talk to the guy. It's on my list of things to do. Unfortunately, like I said, not enough time in the day. But in theory, it's possible.
All right.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Sorry, I cut off something.
Another question: what 3D printers and what material is good for making a master for mass production?
In my experience, you want something that's basically as hard as possible. So there's a bunch of different resins out there. One of the toughest ones is something called Soraya. It smells like dish soap, like really strong dish soap. one of the things the other thing to keep in mind is you basically need ventilation for these, which is not difficult to do. It's just some of the resins you need it for, some of them you don't. The goal is you need something that is, as long as your object is well supported, you're not going to have you're in theory not going to have any warping. What you need something that's solid that can take a bit of a beating. One of the problems with resins is you can only get them so tough, which is why I've gone to like using MJF for masters, because I just don't have to worry about it warping. There's no question in my mind that what I get once I order it from Sculpteo and I get it, I'm in good shape. There is still some resins out there that if you go through this whole complicated curing process, in theory, it's as hard as a hard hat. Great, but I'm not putting it in a 5-gallon distilled water barrel that's kept at X temperature, and you shine a UV light. It gets really complicated. And annoying, because even when you think you've cured it right, there's no guarantee you actually have. The only way you're going to know is if somebody calls you up and says, hey, this worked on me.
Now, is it possible to make a print master and then you make a mold and then make a master out of that, which would be a lot more durable?
You could. You'd have to make it out of something tough, like an epoxy or something like that, but you could do it.
Well, one thing to keep in mind with the resin from the 3D printer is if you were to stick that straight into like a silicone to like make the mold out of, I think there's sulfate in the actual resin that reacts with the mold material, and it will never ever cure. So whatever you do, make sure that you put a primer on it first. A pretty thick primer to make sure that there's no
not just primer. Make sure that if there's any resin residue, you get it off the print.
Yeah.
Or you're in trouble.
Yeah.
First mold I made, the part didn't fully. The mold got screwed up badly, and basically what happened is I didn't properly clean the part. So what I ended up doing is I got an ultrasonic cleaner, and you put rubbing alcohol in it, put the part in it, run the cleaner for like 10 minutes, and it takes all the excess off. It basically dissolves 3D printer resins, and then you're good to go. You still have to worry about, is it tough enough? Yeah. And one of the things that alcohol will do is it will soften the resin a little bit. So you basically need to let it dry and then re-cure it. It's more time consuming than anything. Not difficult to do. I think anyone can do it once you know what the process is. It's just, like I said, it's time consuming. Yeah. That's why I've gotten away from doing a lot of it myself and having people help me with it. Because there's only so much time in the day. I do have a day job. The bald guy that I work for is standing in the other room. But like I said, you got to spread yourself out a little bit.
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to. But I mean, you look at what Jozef's doing, and he's basically hitting it out of the park. Oh yeah, I'm nowhere near him. There's no question in my mind. Jozef can he could probably make just about anything. Judging by the fact that he's already got gears designed, dude, do you realize how difficult it is to design a gear?
Yeah, they were pain. I swear, but I didn't realize this was recorded.
Once the printers get to the point that you can print the gears and they will hold up, dude, you realize there's a market for that. Not just with model railroaders, but like car people, like RC car people could use gear sets. Model plane guys. Once those gears are figured out, that's one of your biggest costs. So when I've talked to Kieran, the guy who owns Haskell Trains, I carry some of his stuff. But when me and him have talked and tossed ideas around, one of the biggest costs of developing like a locomotive is your gearing. To get your gearing made right, you have to have, I think it was like 0.075 of a micron of clearance. So your gears mesh properly and they don't bind up. It was some infinitesimally small number. But then the tooling needs to be spot on. And then what you make that gear from has to be spot on. You can't pull a Bachmann and use unaged Delrin and expect it not to crack. You have to use a more stable material, like, nylon or, proper, like acetyl resins or something like that. You got to do it like that, but it is what it is. Like I said, the technology is going to get there, guys. Jozef is big.
The other thing that we really don't understand is what the different bindings are between the layers in the 3D printing. I mean, it's a really interesting thing. If you think about a gear that's 3D printed, inside of the gear, you've got those layers. And as the printer prints, you're getting kind of an interesting binding between the layers where they touch and they bind. And it may have actually interesting shear angles that are different depending upon the shear pressures. And by the way, I have no knowledge on this. I'm just an engineer by profession, but I'm thinking about the material structures of how it's deposited and because you're depositing this way, you're going to get interesting shear angles within the materials where you have different bindings at different angles. So the angle you print the gear at may actually have impact on the strength of shear within the gear. It's actually a pretty interesting thought process about how much you might, to really make a working gear, not just a model, but something that actually could take stress. You probably have to think about it in some interesting ways. I'll leave that to you guys. I have no interest.
Yeah, but you basically just described the problem with printing a gear.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's an interesting thought process.
The closest that we're getting right now is like MJF printing. That's the most homogeneous I've seen so far. Because
okay. So guys, I want to ask you guys are at a point. So for those of us in the audience that are neophytes, so I was looking at buying this Anycubic 3D laser resin printer. It's a light cure printer, right? Where it does that. Have you guys ever played with those? Or is that, how do those kind of things, for not doing detailed like mechanical parts, but more just general modeling? What are your thought process?
The Anycubic photon, I guess, right?
Yeah, the Anycubic photon. It seems like kind of, and for like producing detailed parts and things, if you want to just make X, Y, Z, seemed like it was a pretty interesting, pretty reasonable way to get into it.
Yeah, so I got the Elgu Mars, which is a similar one. It has the same main board in it. It's the same technology pretty much underneath the hood, and that's what I use for all the stuff that I do.
Oh, cool.
And they work well. There's of course limitations to it, but like all the stuff that you've seen is all printed on the Elgu Mars, which is pretty much a clone of a Photon S.
Oh, interesting. Cool. For those of us that are kind of technical but have never done it, it's one of these things of trying to find information to understand what's interesting. And there's just enough. There's so many differentiation and processes now. Making decisions is hard. And always, just from an engineering perspective, it always seemed to me that the problem with the 3D printers that use the resin, where it's in a roll and it goes up, is there's so much mass in the print head. As an engineer, the problem is you're trying to move something. And whenever you move something, there's inertia, and stopping the inertia is really hard, where the resin printers use light convergence at a point. So the things you're moving are much lighter because they're light. It seemed to me that you should be able to get better resolution just at a general point in technology and cost structures with the light-based pointing versus trying to mechanically move something that's got orders of magnitude more mass. So that just at a pure design perspective. But then I guess you have to deal with the curing thing, which you were talking about.
You are right, though. It is a lot. It's a totally different way of doing it.
Yeah.
Filament printers, I started out with a filament printer to test with. And one of the things you notice is it's not just that inertia you have to worry about. Like you can look at the layers, and one of them's just off a little bit, and they don't quite line up perfectly.
Yep.
But one of the things you also got to remember is the mechanical stuff. The heavier it is, the quicker it's going to wear out.
Oh, that's true too. The friction wear is much higher as you get heavier.
Oh, I know. I can't even remember what it was. It was this little white thing, and just a little monoprice is what it was. And I ran that thing into the ground. By the time I was done with it, there was no sense in rebuilding it, because I had discovered in any cubic photon, which that was my first printer, that's what I made my detail parts on. And it worked fantastically well. It's just, oh, hold on, James is trying to get back in. But that printer worked fantastically well. And then we had a power surge and it fried the board. Whoops. Whoops. Oh, well, not the end of the world. It happens. It worked very well for me. I still have one. I haven't used it in the better part of a year because I had the X10, which is basically gigantic. It's basically the size of a small microwave. You know, a lot of these like Anycubic, Elegumars, they're basically something you can fit on a desk.
So guys, my memory on this was in probably the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. I went to an AT&T plant. My job, I went to this AT&T plant, and they were building phones. And the phones were designed in New Jersey, and this plant was in Illinois. And they would send the digital image of the phone over, and they would print it in basically a gel printer. And it was this box that was the size of a large refrigerator, maybe even 2 refrigerators. And it had this thing that it printed in it with this gel that was kind of clear, and it came out with, the whole thing of a phone. Remember the old Bell phones? And, it struck me that technology has been around for a long time. This concept of using heat, light-based heat to fuse, a resin gel at a point in space. And that technology and industry preceded the injection stuff by probably 2 decades. Which means it's really, sometimes the easy technology really works well if you can do the gel. That's kind of where my thought process has been at in terms of getting into this, trying the resin printers.
I can tell you that the N-Scale team's folks really enjoy the photon, though the Elegumars is starting to get more press out of it. And they're all waiting for the
Is there anybody putting out anybody doing any reviews on these from the perspective of, so if you look at those two, if you look at those two printers and said, okay, I want to buy one. I mean, right now the Photon I think is like $270 on eBay, and then they have a curing tower, which actually I'd be really interested if you guys have looked at their curing tower, which apparently you can put something in and
sitting in there.
You have one sitting there. I was curious whether it was worth buying, because it seemed to me that combination was kind of a cool combination. But then the Mars one sounds like it may be. Curious if there's a differentiation in why you would buy one versus the other.
I think between the Photon S or the Photon and the Elegumars, I think both are fine. You're going to get fanboys for the one, you're going to get fanboys for the other. There's the 3D printing nerd on YouTube that does a bunch of reviews who's good at that. And there is what's his name? Let's look him up. He does more resin printer reviews, but Uncle Jesse is called on YouTube.
Uncle Jesse.
And the 3D printing nerd and Uncle Jesse both do reviews of printers in general, and both of them tend to have deals with people from Elgu or from the Photon people, and they tend to get the printers up front to do some test runs with, and both I've found are very honest, as in they don't take a bribe from the company to try and sell the machine, because you got those on YouTube as well, where you got the guy, oh, this printer is amazing, and then the day after he's like, oh, this printer is amazing too. Like they're very honest, and they don't mind saying that they don't like a product if they don't like it. So there's the
Cool.
two I tend to look at when new printers tend to come out.
Yeah, this is one of those things where it seems incredibly interesting, and there are just innumerable things where I think I could use it for things personally. And it's tools are pretty easy to use if you're technical. It's just that whole thing about by making a $500 investment, are you doing the right thing? And it's kind of, first there's almost this technology choice, and then there's the vendor choice, and the spectrum is really challenging to figure out when you're starting from scratch.
Yeah. I think the Photon and the Elgu both use the same board underneath, as in the same electronics board from the same vendor and the same actual hardware that runs, or the actual software that runs on those boards.
Oh, okay.
So it's just the brand and the design of them that are slightly different. But other than that, they're fairly identical.
Cool. Thanks. That made it worthwhile.
Listen, guys,
I'm not interested in being in business and competing with you guys, so it's not turning on the competition. I'm so far past that. No interest.
If anyone does have questions though on printer stuff or anything, even after this, I'm on Facebook, I'm on email. Just feel free to reach out. I'm happy to give information or share tips and tricks as I go and I figure stuff out. So,
what would be a good printer to start with? Something that you don't really want to, buy the latest and greatest machine and all that, but just, so you can learn on it. And if you break it, it's like, okay, well, we can get another one. Sort of like like how a lot of use the Raspberry Pi on a lot of things because, well, you break that, you can easily get another one.
Yeah. It depends a bit on the detail that you want. If you're looking at HO scaled and those kind of things, you probably want to look at a resin printer. And then the Photon and the Elgu are the cheaper ones out there that also are quality and have a pretty big group behind it. I'm in no sense or anything backed by any of them.
Just a comment on the comment cheaper. There are probably two characteristics of these printers. By the way, I have no knowledge. This is purely from just thinking about it. One is the size of the object you can create. So the bigger the pad in the printer, like if you look at the printers we're talking about, the pad's about that big. So you really can't produce anything more, but it's about 3 by 4 inches, right?
Yeah,
in those printers.
One.
Yeah. So the first thing is, if you want to produce a car frame that's 7 inches long, you can't do it on these printers as one part. You're gonna have to produce 2 parts and join them together. So if you want to produce a 7-inch car frame, you've got to buy a more expensive printer. The other is the better the printer, the better the resolution, and this is really important, the automation of the calibration functionality. So and by the way, I have never used a 3D printer, but I can guarantee you, if you pay more, you get a bigger print surface, you get better resolution, and you get automated calibration, because calibration is a big thing. Dylan, you'll tell us, right? If you have a printer, calibrating is a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. If your calibration is off, you're either not going to stick to the build plate, or it's going to come out slant, crooked, or you basically need to be perfectly level.
So
some printers are easier to level than the others.
Right. My point is that the cheap printers will be harder, will take more effort to set up than the more expensive printers. It'll be more automated than the expensive printers.
Yes. Yeah, I have used filament printers and all that. I haven't used the resin printer, but I do. There is a makerspace that's near where I'm at, that's where I learned a lot of stuff with 3D printing, but I've not done anything with resin.
It's a different beast, filament versus resin, just because your filament print comes off and you're pretty much done. The resin printers, you do have to go through that process of actually dipping it into isopropyl alcohol or something like that, just for a while, just to get the resin off. You got those washing stations, or you get a what's called ultrasonic cleaner to try and get it off, and then you got the post processing of where actually you have to cure it. For me, generally, I take it off the printer, I dip it in that tower that Phil just mentioned, where you got it to wash it, and then I just put it in, the nail salons thingies. I just bought 2 of those and I stacked them next to each other so it has like a 360 thingy. They're expensive now because they got UV light in it, and people think that they can kill viruses with that all the time, but those nail salons don't do anything with that. So they got a bit more expensive, but I bought 2 and it was like $25 each. So for $50 I had a curing station and I just taped them together. That's where it goes in. And I cure my stuff for maybe 5 minutes, and that's enough. But again, that's very tiny stuff. The bigger you get, the bigger you're gonna have to, and the thicker the stuff, the more post curing you have to do.
Yeah,
So
right,
I actually
right
was.
now I'm actually thinking of, just learning and how to do stuff and all that. So I'm not, going quote into production to be offhand. I mean, I have an idea for basically a novelty, not something that's a novelty. So if it winds up being a good seller, yay. If it doesn't, oh well. So I mean, it's one of those things. I was planning on building them, actually hacking up cars to make them and all that. But
So there's a guy in Australia named Luke Towan who's on YouTube. Does a lot of videos. You haven't seen him. He does good videos. He's a bit of an influencer. And by the way, influencers mean that they get paid to tell you what they like. So you have to kind of, whenever somebody's an influencer, you have to pay a little attention. But he seems pretty reasonable. He actually has a couple of videos. He uses the Photon printer. And that's actually where I saw it. And what he's doing is producing details, not trying to mass produce or volume or do it, but just like, oh, I need this for my thing. I can go in and do a quick 3D and print it and have it for a model. So it's kind of, I think that's cool for us that are hobbyists more than anything else. That's what I'm trying to find.
That's what I started with. That's how I started.
Yeah.
I mean, since using the filament printers, that's why I never thought of doing anything with model trains and all that, because they don't have the resolution. But now it's one
actually, it might have enough resolution depending on what you want to do. I've been printing buildings, and for the windows and doors, I get that done in Shapeways with their resin printer. But with the for the buildings, I use again Shapeways, but I use the nylons, and I just don't need the kind of detail for a wall. And it does clapboard in N scale well enough.
Yeah, all right.
Set your expectations and.
Absolutely.
I think that's really it. It is really what you're trying to print. Like if you're trying to print fine details, then resin you're probably going to get better luck with. But if like you said, if it's a big wall or a big building, even in N scale, it will come out fine with just filament.
Now, what was the name of the guy on YouTube?
Guys, pardon?
Mention the guy that Luke something.
Luke
YouTube
Towan. Luke Towan. Towan.
All right.
I think Jim was trying to say something, guys.
Yes.
Guys, I hate to call this an end, but we've been here 2 hours, believe it or not.
Danke.
And from my standpoint, these are fantastic. I hope you all enjoy this because, I didn't want these to become clinics. And I didn't want them to become, just one person talking for 15 minutes and that's it. So it really is great for me to be able to see the discussion and to see how far away from the subject the meetings have gone. Both this one and the one Wednesday night did the same thing. And I think that's great because, again, I don't want these to be clinics. These are, I want to try to introduce modelers that I think are really talented and that really have something that they can pass on to other modelers. Hopefully that'll start attending these that want to learn some of these skills. Because whether it's 3D printing, whether it's building in brass, whatever it is, that's the only way the hobby, in my opinion, is going to continue to grow is if we can get more people building models in it. And that's what I'm hoping that these are going to accomplish. So I'm really pleased that you're here. I appreciate you staying as long as you have. The next one is Wednesday, the 27th. We have two people, both of them named Mike Warman and Mike Lyle. And they're going to be talking about building a 25-ton critter. And the title of it is Mike Buys a Critter. That's what they want to call it. And I hope you won't miss it, because this is going to turn into more than one episode of this. This is going to be their start of it. And then probably in 3 weeks or a month, they'll be ready for a part 2 and that kind of thing. And over the course of a couple of months, they're actually going to build this critter. And so this is going to be the first one that they do of this coming Wednesday. So I hope that you can attend and see it. I hope you learned something today, and I hope it can help you in your modeling. And with that said, thank you so much for coming, and look forward to seeing you Wednesday.
And thank you, Jim, for organizing these.
Thank you, Jim.
This is great fun just to be able to talk with people and share some of the stuff that we're doing. So thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate your help in this. Without people like you willing to do it, this couldn't happen.
Thank you.
Excellent,
you.
Jim.
Yeah.
Thank you.
By the way,
Thank
for
you.
those of you who didn't notice, I just sent an emoticon reaction. Down, if you go down where it says reactions, you can clip and you can do a hand clap.
Oh, yeah.
It's a way of, at the end of a presentation, everybody clapping hands like you would, kind of like the Germans where they tap on the table.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that was good. That was good. Great to learn. Good info. One of the things we need more kind of information about 3D printing for folks
Yeah,
to
I
use
agree.
more as hobbyists. I think it solves an issue for people of saying, you know, can I, for $500 or $500, can I solve these kind of detail issues for myself of the stuff you can't buy? You know, quite frankly, if I can buy something, if I need 10 of something, I can buy it, and it's going to cost me X each, I'm going to buy it versus making it. The reason I want it is things I can't make. I wanted to build a Bear River bridge for the Nevada County narrow gauge, it's for ON30, using the components from the microengineering trestle kit. And you have to create these plates to put everything together. You know, the rivet plates.
Rivet plate.
And trying to cut them out of styrene is impossible. But if I could basically print them in a 3D printer, a resin printer, pop them out, glue them on, I could build that bridge, and it would look so much better than if I try to do it in styrene, putting little dot resins on it. They'll never look good. And so
Absolutely.
it's things, and nobody else is ever going to use those. Right? And it's that kind of thing, and how we can get that going as a group. It's really an interesting thought process.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
There is one Facebook group called 3D Printing for Model Trains that is growing, that has information, and that has a bunch of people that just hang out on there as well with you know, and if you ask questions in there, I'm pretty sure you'll get answers. I'm definitely in there as well, and I know there's a few other ones. I think Dylan, you're in there too, right?
Did you guys catch that?
So I'll just share that. I do ON30 modular, so that's actually a module photo.
Wow.
So, and actually it was interesting. It was taken with an iPhone, and I just took the module outside and set it up and decided to take a picture. And it turned out just almost and actually the truck model is unweathered. It's literally $5 from a train show bought 2 weeks before. And the STC card in the back is unweathered. It's a Bachmann out of the box car. And I just threw them on there to take the picture, but I took it outside, and it turned out the interesting photo hint here is the car is turned just so that you can see the reflection of the sky in the window. And by the way, I shouldn't admit this, but I would love to say that it was brilliant concept. The reality is it was total serendipity, but it's an interesting thing. If you take a model outside to shoot it, start thinking about how you catch the light in the windows, because that actually makes this an incredibly, when you look at it, that one thing causes your brain to say, it's much more believable because you see that light reflection on the windshield.
Yeah.
And that's actually a believability thing that you don't see anywhere else. So it's just kind of an interesting thought process.
Nice.
Thought you guys might appreciate it.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Anyway, everybody have a great Memorial Day. It's a little late. It's only 6 o'clock here on the West Coast. So I'm going to go see what my wife wants to do for dinner. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks for coming.